Welcome to the Anole Garden. We chose that name for a couple of reasons, one of them being that we thought everybody in Florida knew what an anole was. Apparently that's not the case, so we're going to show you what an anole is and why we named our garden after them. I just want to jump in really quick and point out that this video is about our garden, but it's not necessarily about gardening. So I didn't want everybody watching through the whole thing about anoles expecting something about how to fix tomatoes or something. We're just going to talk about anoles. Although, near the end, we will talk about a couple of helpful things that they do in the garden. So let's get into anoles. Anoles are the little lizards you often see running around in the background of our videos. They're also in our intro and outro. Anoles have pads on their feet that they use to climb and stick to surfaces, and they have a throat flap called a dewlap. No other lizard has both of those distinguishing features. If it has those, it's an anole. Before we go any further though, I'm going to talk about the name. In Florida, my whole life, everyone has called them anoles, with 3 syllables. Other people call them anoles. We're in Florida, they're anoles. There are over 400 different kinds of anoles throughout South, Central, and North America, including many of the Caribbean islands. In the US, they can be found in most southern states, although we only have one that's a native, the green anole. Here in Florida, it's believed that there are 10 established species. We're pretty sure that we have 3 different species living in our garden: the green, the Cuban brown, and probably some Puerto Rican cresteds. We regularly see the greens, although they are a little more reclusive than the Cuban browns, and they prefer climbing in plant cover as opposed to running around on the ground. It's fairly difficult to tell the difference between the Cuban browns and the Puerto Rican cresteds, so we just consider all of them browns. The greens also can change color from green to gray to brown. This seems to be based on either a perceived threat or the temperature. When cold, they usually turn brown, possibly to help them absorb more heat from sunlight. When relaxed or hunting, they're usually bright green and blend in amazingly well in our garden, especially on any trellising plants. The browns are far more common and are the ones that we interact with and see the most. They stay brown, although they can change color to a darker brown and almost black, but they can't turn green. Other than color, basic temperament, and the preference for climbing versus being on the ground, the behaviors of the two are pretty similar, although greens generally seem to be a little bit more cautious than the browns. All anoles in our area are fiercely territorial and spend a lot of their time posturing either to warn off others, to establish a pecking order, or to impress the ladies. This usually involves lots of head bobbing, flexing of their dewlap, or doing push-ups. They pretty much eat anything that can fit in their mouth. Sometimes that includes each other, but definitely they prefer live bugs. This is where they have a benefit to the garden. They have excellent vision that seems particularly attuned to detect movement. We've seen them come from like 20 feet away to eat a caterpillar once it starts moving. Fortunately for us, they eat almost any bug they spot. However, they're pretty opportunistic and maybe a little lazy. They rarely go for anything that requires too much effort. So they generally leave our bees and our wasps alone. I've never seen one eat a ladybug or butterflies, and I don't really know why. But they generally tend to leave our predator insects alone and eat the bad stuff, which is one of the reasons we like them so much. They won't tackle a spider in a web, but if one runs across an open pool deck, it's fair game. When attacked, they can lose their tail, which will continue to wriggle around on its own for quite some time, presumably as a distraction for the predator so they can get away. This is usually what happens if you try to catch one. Their tails will grow back, mostly. Our anoles are active in the day, and they all return to their homes as soon as the sun goes down. Since they're cold-blooded, they may not come out if it's cold or cloudy. They don't mind rain at all, as long as it's warm. Our anoles are all a little different, and they have distinct personalities and behaviors. Some are curious and will get right into whatever it is we're doing. Others will find a perch above us somewhere so that they can watch. The browns generally all like to be about 3 feet off the ground, usually pointing downwards, and they'll find a tree trunk or something where they can see far, but without being too visible. They do have lots of predators, the primary ones being snakes and birds. They're generally pretty good about avoiding trouble, so if you suddenly see all your anoles disappear, it's probably because there's a hawk, crow, or snake somewhere around. We name some of our anoles when we determine that it's the same one that we keep seeing doing something. But we're not very original, and most of them end up being called something like cucumber anole or bean lizard, usually depending on where they choose to live. Our anoles follow us around the garden as we do things, sometimes in groups of up to 10 or so. While we would like to think it's because they like us, we really know it's because we're disturbing bugs as we walk around, and they get to have an easy lunch. We also feed them directly. If I find a caterpillar, it's getting fed to an anole. Last year, I fed them in a particular place and trained them that whenever I would come there, I would bring caterpillars. They definitely are trainable, and they will quickly lose any fear of humans they have if they have a good reason to do so. Unfortunately, the most amusing interaction we have with them is when we mess with their territory. They all have specific places that are theirs. If that happens to be a potted plant that's getting replaced or something like that, we end up ejecting the resident of the pot and watch the territory battle ensue as everyone's boundaries get shuffled. If we have to rearrange the pool deck because of a coming storm or something, it can trigger an insane anole war for the next 3 days until they all work it out. We chose the name Anole Garden because the anoles are truly a part of our garden, and they've been here no matter what we've done to their homes. We were initially worried that the conversion to the garden would upset the balance and we'd lose the population, but it seems that the opposite has happened. The better our garden does, the better the anoles do, and the more we get. We have way more anoles now than we've ever had before. Also, they see us more often because we're in the garden, so they don't freak out as much when we're doing things around them. We generally try to keep them in mind with any decisions that we make in the garden, usually on how we treat pests and things like that. I know that I could easily defeat our pickleworm issue by using a pesticide dust, but I also know that that would kill many of our anoles. So we use less destructive methods and just deal with the losses from those decisions. Our anoles aren't exactly pets, but we can easily identify many of them and consider them our friends. They're a regular part of our garden and our life. So we hope that was helpful in explaining what an anole is and why we have them in our garden and why we like them. For us, anoles are a source of interest in the garden. They're our little garden friends. We wanted to introduce you to them if you didn't already know what they were. Maybe you don't have any in your area. Maybe you do and you just don't think about them. But you might want to consider the next time you're in your garden, pay a little attention to your anoles because they're probably paying attention to you. Thanks for watching. See you next time.